The signal came from nowhere. That was the problem. For 47,000 years, the Galactic Council had mapped every corner of known space. They knew where civilizations could grow and where they could not. The dead zones were places where nothing lived and nothing could. Probes sent into those regions simply stopped working. Ships that entered never came back. Reality itself seemed to break down in those dark spaces between the stars. So when the mathematics appeared, transmitted from the heart of the largest dead zone, every species in the council felt the same cold fear. Ambassador of the collective stood before the council chambers, his four eyes focused on the holographic display. The equations floated in the air, beautiful and terrifying. They solved a problem the council's greatest minds had worked on for 8,000 years. The unified dimensional theorem was now complete, answered by something that lived where nothing should exist. "This is not random noise," said his voice translator rendering his clicks and whistles into council standard. "This is deliberate. Something in the whisper grave wants us to know it exists." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of languages and concerns. The whisper grave was the oldest and largest of the dead zones, a massive region of space that had been silent since before the first council species had discovered fire. Ancient myths from a dozen civilizations spoke of it as a place where the universe forgot how to exist. High Scholar Myra of a species known for their scientific achievements, raised one of her 6 manipulator arms. "We must investigate. Knowledge demands it." "Knowledge also demands we stay alive," countered General of the military caste. His scaled face showed the stress patterns of deep concern. "Nothing survives in the dead zones. We have records going back 30. Every expedition, every probe, every automated system fails." But the council voted as they always did when faced with the unknown. They would send a ship. The Harmonious Accord was the finest diplomatic vessel in the fleet, equipped with technology from all the major species. 12 representatives would go, protected by every defensive system the council could provide. The journey to the Whisper Grave took 43 days. For the first 40, everything seemed normal. Then the ship crossed the boundary and the universe changed. Pilot was the first to notice. "Navigation is showing contradictory readings," she reported, her antennae twitching with confusion. "We are in 3 different locations simultaneously." "That is impossible," said, but even as he spoke, he felt something wrong in his own thoughts. He remembered arriving at this moment, but he also remembered not yet leaving the last sector. Both memories felt equally real. The ship systems began failing in sequence. Life support stuttered. Communications went silent. The defensive shields that had taken centuries to perfect simply turned off. The crew prepared for death. Then something reached out and stabilized them. It was not subtle. The ship systems did not gradually improve. They suddenly worked again, but differently. The displays showed information that should not be possible, presented in ways that hurt to look at. The engines ran on principles that violated known physics. "Something is rewriting our technology," Myra whispered, her voice full of wonder and horror. That was when the other ship appeared. It was ugly by any aesthetic standard the council knew. Angular and crude, covered in what looked like impact damage and hasty repairs. Parts of it seemed to exist in different states at once, solid and transparent, present and absent. Symbols covered its hull in a language no database recognized. The communication came through in broken council standard, the grammar all wrong but the meaning clear. "You called, we came. Humans hear everything." The word humans meant nothing to anyone on board. No species in council records had that name. No civilization in any database matched it. Responded carefully. "We are the Harmonious Accord representing the Galactic Council. We received a transmission from this region. Was that you?" The response took several minutes. "Yes, you sent probes here many cycles ago. 317 of your standard years. We received them. Learned your languages, we have been preparing. Preparing for what? General demanded. To help, the barriers are failing, the whisper grows. You do not know this yet. Your border worlds will know soon. The human ship transmitted coordinates. Against all safety protocols, ordered the pilot to follow. What they found in those coordinates made the impossible transmission seem ordinary. Thousands of ships floated in formation, each one different from the others. Some looked half-finished. Others appeared to be built from different technologies welded together without care for consistency. A few seemed to flicker in and out of existence. "This is our fleet," the human voice said. "We are ready to show you what you face." They brought the council ship deeper into the whisper grave, to a region where even the stars looked wrong. Space itself seemed sick here, twisted in ways that made the crew feel ill just by observing it. "This is where we live," the human explained. "This is where we grew up. This is normal for us." Could not understand. Nothing can live here. Reality is breaking down. We can see it. How do you survive? We do not just survive. We learn to use it. The human ship did something that should have been impossible. It split into 5 copies of itself, each one real and solid. Then it merged back together, but in a different configuration than before. Parts that had been on the left were now on the right. The damage patterns were different. "You see broken reality," the human said. "We see tools, we see opportunities, we see home." Myra was working frantically at her console, trying to understand the readings her instruments provided. "This is not possible," she kept repeating. "The quantum signatures are contradictory. The causal chain is inverted. This ship is operating on principles that cannot exist." "Cannot exist in your space," the human corrected. "In our space, different rules apply. Sometimes rules do not apply at all. We learn to work with this." "But why?" asked. "Why show us this? Why reach out now after thousands of years?" The human ship's display changed, showing an image that made the council representatives recoil. It was a map of the galaxy, but wrong. Large sections were marked in black, spreading like an infection across the spiral arms. "This is the Whisper. It is not a place. It is an entity. It exists between dimensions, consuming reality, turning order into entropy. The dead zones you know are not natural. They are quarantine zones created by a race you call the architects in your oldest myths." Had heard stories of the architects. Every long-lived species had them. Ancient beings who built impossible structures and then vanished. Most scholars thought they were legends. "The architects were real," the human continued. "They built barriers to contain the Whisper. They sacrificed their civilization to save yours, but those barriers are old. They are failing. The Whisper is breaking through." General studied the map with a military eye. "These black regions, you claim they are growing." "Yes, your border worlds are already experiencing reality failures. Small things at first, objects appearing in 2 places, time running backward for brief moments, memories of events that did not happen. Your people will think they are going mad, but it is just the Whisper beginning to consume your reality." "Why should we believe you?" challenged. "You appear from nowhere claiming threats we cannot verify." The human was silent for a moment. Then the voice said something that changed everything. "Check your border colony on Theta III. You lost contact with them 6 days ago. Your council believes it is a communication failure. Go there. See what the Whisper does." Check the records. The human was right. Theta III had gone silent. Search and rescue ships were scheduled to investigate. "How do you know this?" he demanded. "Because we have been watching, because we have been listening, because we are humans and we evolved in the heart of the Whisper's prison. We grew up in places where reality breaks, where the laws of physics are suggestions, where consciousness itself is under attack. We survived because we learned to adapt. Our minds developed differently than yours. We can hold contradictory truths simultaneously. We can function when causality fails. We can think in ways that should not be possible." The human ship moved closer, and for the first time, the crew of the Harmonious Accord could see through its viewing ports. The beings inside were bipedal, similar to several council species in basic structure. But there was something in their movements, in the way they interacted with their environment, that seemed fundamentally different. Earth is in the center of the Whisper Grave, the human explained. Our sits in the deepest part of the dead zone you mapped. We built our civilization while reality tried to erase us. Every generation we had to learn again how to exist. Children born on Earth experience things your species would call impossible. The sun rises in the west some days. Islands exist on Tuesday but not on Wednesday. People remember futures that never happen. This is our normal. This is what made us human. This is madness, Myra whispered. Yes, the human agreed. By your standards, we are all mad, but we are alive, and we are strong. And now the whisper is coming for you. Your civilizations developed in stable space where physics is predictable. You have never had to fight for your reality, but we have, and we can teach you. Felt the weight of the decision that would face the council. Accept help from beings who lived in nightmare regions, who operated on impossible principles, who were by their own admission mad, or face and threat they did not understand alone. What do you want in return? He asked. The council had learned long ago that nothing came free. We want what every living thing wants, the human said, and for the first time there was emotion in the voice, something that sounded like hope. We want to not be alone anymore. We want to meet others. We want to show the universe that even in the heart of entropy, life finds a way. We heard your probes centuries ago. We spent generations learning your languages, understanding your cultures, building ships that could survive in both your reality and ours. We prepared for this moment. The void called out with your transmissions. Now the void answers back, with humans. The Harmonious Accord began its journey home carrying news that would shake the galaxy. Behind them, the human fleet waited in the dark places between stars, patient as they had always been. They had survived in hell. Now they would teach others how to do the same. Whether the council was ready or not, humanity had arrived. The council chambers had never been so divided. In the 3 weeks since the Harmonious Accord returned, the debate had grown more heated each day. Representatives shouted over each other in a dozen languages. Delegations walked out only to return hours later with new arguments. The footage from the Whisper Grave played on endless loop, showing the human fleet and their impossible technologies. But it was the evidence from Theta III that truly terrified them. The rescue ships had found the colony intact but changed. Buildings existed in multiple locations at once. Colonists reported memories of conversations they had not yet had. Children drew pictures of events that would happen the next day. The laws of cause and effect had become suggestions rather than rules, and it was spreading. Each day, the affected area grew larger. 7 more colonies reported similar phenomena, then 12, then 23. High Scholar Myra presented her findings to the assembled council, her 6 arms gesturing at holographic displays of data that made no sense. The reality failures are accelerating. Mathematical models suggest that within 5 standard years, 10% of council space will be affected. Within 20 years, the majority of our civilizations will face collapse. Then we must evacuate, suggested Ambassador of the Celestial Unity. We move our populations away from the spreading zones. To where? General demanded. The whisper spreads in all directions. There is no safe direction to run, and we cannot evacuate 312 species across 89,000 systems. Then we fight, said. Fight what? How do you fight something that dissolves reality itself? Our weapons are useless against an enemy that exists between dimensions. Stood and the chamber quieted. He had seniority and respect. There is one option we have not fully discussed. The humans offered their help. The chamber erupted again. A representative from the Dominion stood, his body glowing with agitation. They are not even in our database. They appear from nowhere, claim to have evolved in conditions that cannot support life, and offer help we do not understand. This could be a trap. They could be the source of the whisper itself. They knew about Theta III before we did, countered. They provided the mathematics that solved our greatest theorem. They have been watching us and preparing to help. Or preparing to conquer us when we are weak. Myra raised a manipulator arm. I have analyzed the human technologies we observed. They are not superior to ours in the traditional sense. They are different. They operate on principles that should not work but do. If they wanted to attack us, they would not need to weaken us first. Our defenses are designed for consistent physics. Against enemies who can ignore causality, we would have no defense at all. The debate continued for hours. In the end, the vote was close. 187 species voted to accept human assistance. 125 refused. The council, for the first time in recorded history, split. Those who refused called themselves the pure. They would seal their borders and maintain their reality through isolation. Those who accepted called themselves the pragmatic. They would learn from the humans, no matter the cost. The human fleet arrived in pragmatic space 1 month later. 3,000 ships of impossible design, each one a contradiction of engineering principles. They did not ask for territory or resources. They asked only for volunteers. Doctor was the first human most council species met face to face. He was unremarkable in appearance, a biped with brown skin and dark eyes. But when he spoke at the first joint conference, everyone understood why the humans were different. You think in straight lines, he said simply. Cause leads to effect. A happens, then B happens, then C. This is how stable reality works. But in the whisper, A and C can happen simultaneously while B never occurs. Your minds cannot accept this. When you experience it, you break. You go mad. But human minds evolved in that chaos. We can hold multiple contradictory truths at once without breaking. He demonstrated a simple test. He held up an object, a cube made of an unknown material. What color is this? He asked. Blue, said one representative. Red, said another. They looked at each other in confusion. Argument started immediately, but simply smiled. You are both correct. It is blue and red simultaneously. Your eyes see one or the other because your brains cannot process both, but the cube is actually both colors at once. This is normal matter from the whisper grave. This is what we work with every day. The training began slowly. Humans taught volunteers meditation techniques that seemed designed to break logical thinking. They introduced technologies that failed successfully, weapons that worked by not working, shields that protected by allowing damage through. It was agony for species that had spent perfecting rational thought. Many volunteers broke. Their minds could not handle the contradictions. They were sent home with apologies and compensation, but others adapted. Slowly, painfully, they learned to think in ways their ancestors never could. They learned to doubt reality while trusting it. They learned to accept failure as another form of success. They learned to be a little bit mad. The first combat engagement came sooner than anyone expected. The whisper pushed into the sector, a densely populated region near Council core space. Reality failures spread across 3 inhabited worlds in a matter of days. The Pragmatic Alliance scrambled to respond. The human battle fleet entered the affected region without hesitation. Council forces followed, crews composed of adapted volunteers and human advisors. What they found was worse than the simulations. The whisper was not invisible. It could be seen as a kind of darkness that was not the absence of light but the absence of existence itself. It flowed through space like liquid, touching ships and making them forget they were real. Crews vanished. Weapons fired and unmade themselves. Ships that entered the darkness sometimes emerged changed, their crews speaking languages that had never existed, remembering histories that had never happened. The humans launched their first weapon, something they called a paradox engine. It was a device the size of a small fighter craft, covered in symbols that hurt to read. When it activated, reality around it began to contradict itself in controlled ways. Space became both empty and full. Time flowed forward and backward simultaneously. Matter existed and did not exist in the same moment, and the whisper recoiled from it. The darkness pulled back from the paradox zone like a living thing avoiding pain. The affected worlds began to stabilize, but the council volunteers who witnessed it felt something change in their minds. They could now see things that were not there. They could sense possibilities that did not exist. They had been infected with human perception. "What have you done to them?" demanded Captain's nephew, a young officer named who had volunteered for the adapted forces. Looked at the affected council soldiers with something like sympathy. "We have given them a choice. They can learn to control this new perception, or they can be sent home where eventually it will fade. But if they stay, if they learn, they can help us fight. They can become bridges between your reality and ours." "They are damaged," accused. "They are changed," corrected. "There is a difference. Damage implies something is broken. Change means something is different. They are not less than they were. They are more. They see deeper now. They understand that reality is not fixed but negotiable. This understanding is what lets us fight the whisper." The paradox engines were deployed across affected sectors. Each one created a zone of controlled chaos that the whisper could not consume. But each deployment required human operators and adapted council volunteers willing to exist in those impossible spaces. The psychological cost was enormous. Support facilities were established for soldiers who could no longer distinguish between memory and prediction, between past and future. Therapists from a dozen species tried to help, but traditional methods failed. The adapted ones needed different help, provided by humans who understood what it meant to live in contradiction. The pure species watched from their sealed borders with growing alarm. Some began to reconsider. Others became more entrenched, declaring the pragmatic alliance as compromised and corrupted. 3 species left the council entirely, choosing complete isolation. But the whisper kept growing, and the humans kept fighting, and slowly the impossible became routine. 6 months into the war, something unexpected happened. The whisper changed its tactics. It stopped attacking reality and started attacking humans specifically. Adapted council volunteers reported that their human partners were falling into strange comas. The afflicted ones seemed peaceful, their faces calm. Humans called them the crystallized. Doctor examined the first victims personally, his face grave. "The whisper has learned. It is trying to give us what we have never had: stable reality, perfect, unchanging moments. It is offering us peace." "And they are accepting?" Myra asked, horrified. "Some are. The crystallized are locked in perfect moments of consistency. For the first time in human history, they experience reality that does not shift. It is beautiful to them, seductive, but it is also death. Humans cannot survive in perfect stability any more than you can survive in perfect chaos. We need the contradiction. We need the struggle. Without it, we stop being human." The revelation changed the nature of the war. The whisper was not mindless. It was adapting, learning, targeting its enemy's weaknesses. If it could crystallize humanity, the council would lose its only defense. The humans responded with determination that bordered on ferocity. They could not save the crystallized, but they could prevent more from falling. New training protocols were implemented, teaching humans to reject the lure of stable reality. Volunteers learned to deliberately seek out contradiction, to make themselves hostile environments for the whisper's new weapon. And in the ancient ruins scattered throughout the whisper grave, a human philosopher named made a discovery that would change everything. He found writings from the architects, translated through a dozen dead languages. The truth they revealed was terrifying. The architects had not failed to contain the whisper. They had chosen to join it. They had realized that ordered consciousness and stable matter were aberrations in a universe that naturally tended toward entropy. Life was the disease. The whisper was the cure. The architects had tried to protect younger species from this truth, but eventually they had accepted reality and merged with the whisper, becoming part of the universal return to chaos. When transmitted his findings, the Pragmatic Alliance reeled. If the architects, the most advanced civilization known, had concluded that life itself was wrong, what hope did anyone have? But the humans, mad and beautiful and stubborn, rejected the architect's conclusion, broadcast a response that was heard across half the galaxy. His voice was calm but carried the weight of a species that had been forged in impossible fire. The architects were wrong. They accepted the universe's judgment, but the universe does not get to judge. We do. Yes, entropy is natural. Yes, decay is inevitable. Yes, chaos is the default state, but life is the magnificent exception. We are the defiance. We are the rage against the dying of the light. And if the universe wants to dissolve us back into entropy, it will have to work for it, because we are humans. We evolved in hell. We grew up in the heart of the whisper itself. And we are still here, still fighting, still alive. The void does not get to decide our worth. We do. The message resonated. Pragmatic forces, the adapted volunteers, council species who had learned to think like humans, found new determination. They were no longer fighting to preserve their old reality. They were fighting to prove that any reality was worth preserving. The war entered a new phase, brutal, costly, but no longer hopeless. The plan was audacious even by human standards. Doctor stood before the Joint Command Council, surrounded by holographic displays showing 10,000 worlds, each one marked for simultaneous deployment. The scope was unprecedented. "You want to deploy paradox engines on every major world at once?" General asked, his scales showing patterns of disbelief. The psychological cost alone would be catastrophic. Millions would be exposed to contradictory reality. "Billions," corrected calmly. "But the alternative is extinction. The whisper is not retreating. It is consolidating. Every analysis shows it preparing for a final push. If we wait, we lose. If we act, we have a chance." Myra studied the calculations with her 6 eyes, manipulator arms flying across her console. The mathematics support this. If we can create a network of connected paradoxes across enough worlds, we could trap the whisper in a logical loop. It would spend eternity trying to dissolve contradictions that regenerate themselves. "And what happens to the people on those worlds?" demanded Representative. Despite his support for the Pragmatic Alliance, he still felt the weight of responsibility for billions of lives. "They change," said honestly. "They will experience reality differently. Time will not always flow forward. Cause and effect will become suggestions. Objects will exist in multiple states, but they will live. And over generations they will adapt as we did. It is not an ideal solution, but it is the only solution we have found." The debate lasted for days. The pure species sent messages condemning the plan as a corruption worse than the whisper itself. They argued for evacuation, for finding new galaxies, for anything except deliberately breaking reality for billions of beings. But the whisper did not wait for debates to conclude. It launched its final assault on the Kell cluster, home to 47 billion souls across 16 species. The attack was sudden and overwhelming. Reality did not just fail, it inverted. Living beings found themselves experiencing death and rebirth simultaneously. Planets existed in multiple time periods at once. Civilizations that had not yet risen walked alongside those that had already fallen. The human fleet responded immediately, but even with paradox engines deployed, they could only slow the assault. The Kell cluster was falling, and everyone knew it. The whisper had shown its final form. It was not going to dissolve reality piece by piece. It was going to remake it entirely, returning everything to the primordial entropy from which existence had emerged. The vote came that night. The Pragmatic Alliance authorized Operation Contradiction, the simultaneous deployment of linked paradox engines across 10,000 worlds. The preparation would take 3 weeks. Every human and every adapted volunteer would be needed. There would be no reserve forces, no second chances. Everything would depend on perfect synchronization across distances that should make coordination impossible. But humans had learned to communicate through the whisper itself, sending messages through the spaces between dimensions where normal physics did not apply. They taught this technique to the adapted volunteers, creating a network of impossible communication that spanned the galaxy. The philosopher who had discovered the architect's truth was given a special task. He would enter the deepest part of the Whisper Grave with a small team and attempt direct communication with the entity, not to plead or negotiate, but to explain, to make the Whisper understand what it was fighting. The team consisted of 5 humans and 5 adapted volunteers from different species. They flew ships that existed in states of quantum uncertainty, neither fully real nor fully unreal. As they approached the heart of the Whisper, reality broke down completely. Time lost meaning. Space became abstract. Individual consciousness began to blur. But they pressed on, protected by techniques that should not work but did. Prepared his message carefully, encoding it in mathematics and emotion and pure thought. When they reached the center, a place where even the concept of place ceased to exist, he transmitted. "We know what you are," the message began. "You are entropy. You are the universe returning to equilibrium. You are correct that order is an anomaly and chaos is the natural state. But you are wrong about one thing. You believe you are fixing a mistake. You believe consciousness and life are errors to be corrected. But we are not errors. We are the universe experiencing itself. We are entropy fighting against itself. We are the magnificent contradiction that makes existence worth having." The Whisper responded, not in words but in pure meaning that crashed into their minds like a wave. It showed them the heat death of the universe, the final state where all energy was evenly distributed and nothing could ever happen again. It showed them that this was inevitable, that all their struggling only delayed the unavoidable. Felt the weight of that truth but did not break. Yes, entropy wins eventually, but not today, maybe not for trillion years. And in those years, beings will love and create and think and dream. Suffering will exist, but so will joy. Pain, but also beauty. The end is certain, but the journey is ours to make. You want to end the story before it is finished. We want to see what happens next. That is the difference between you and us. The Whisper's response was a wave of reality dissolution aimed directly at its team. But they had prepared for this. Each team member simultaneously existed in multiple contradictory states, making themselves targets that could not be fully destroyed because they were never fully real. And while the Whisper focused on them, Operation Contradiction began. Across 10,000 worlds, paradox engines activated in perfect synchronization. It was the largest coordinated action in galactic history. Human operators and adapted volunteers worked together, creating zones where reality contradicted itself in specific, controlled ways. Time loops, spatial paradoxes, matter that was both particle and wave in ways that violated quantum mechanics, cause and effect chains that formed closed loops. And then they linked them. Using the impossible communication network, they connected every paradox engine into a single massive system. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. The Whisper, which had been spreading like darkness across the galaxy, suddenly found itself surrounded by contradiction. Every direction it moved, it encountered reality that refused to be dissolved because it was already self-dissolving in controlled patterns. It tried to consume the paradoxes, but each one regenerated using the energy of the Whisper's own attacks. In the heart of the Whisper Grave, and his team felt the entity's confusion. It had never encountered resistance like this. It had expected fear, desperation, denial. Instead, it found defiance wrapped in mathematical precision. It found life that had learned to use chaos as a weapon. The Whisper tried to adapt. It targeted the connections between paradox engines, attempting to isolate them. But the network was redundant in ways that should not be possible. Messages traveled through routes that did not exist. Power flowed from sources that were not there. The system was designed by minds that had evolved in broken reality, and it worked precisely because it should not work. For 3 days, the battle raged at a level beyond normal perception. Adapted volunteers across the galaxy felt the strain as reality itself became a battlefield. Some broke under the pressure. Others discovered they could do things they had not known were possible, thinking in dimensions their species had no names for. The pure species watched from their sealed borders, horrified and fascinated. Some began to question their choice. Others reinforced their isolation, convinced that the pragmatic alliance had become as much a threat as the Whisper itself. On the fourth day, something changed. The Whisper stopped attacking. It did not retreat or surrender, but it stopped pushing forward. Across the galaxy, reality stabilized into new patterns. Strange patterns, certainly, contradictory and impossible by pre-war standards, but stable in their own way. Doctor, exhausted and aged by the strain, made the announcement. The Whisper is contained. It has not been destroyed, and it cannot be destroyed. But it is trapped in a logical loop, forever trying to solve contradictions that regenerate themselves. The barriers will hold as long as we maintain the paradox engine network, as long as there are beings willing to operate them, as long as we remember how to think in ways that should not work. The cost became clear in the following months. 10,000 worlds had been fundamentally changed. Children born there would grow up in reality that did not obey the old rules. Education systems had to be completely redesigned. Philosophy and science had to incorporate contradiction as a basic principle. Many could not adapt and had to be relocated to less affected regions. But the alternative had been extinction, and everyone knew it. The pragmatic alliance transformed into something new. No longer a temporary military coalition, it became a permanent union of species learning to live with controlled chaos. The humans, once isolated in their dead zone, became teachers and guides. They showed the galaxy how to survive when reality could not be trusted. The pure species remained isolated, but their borders were no longer completely sealed. Some individuals began to cross over, curious about the changed worlds. Some returned immediately, unable to cope. Others stayed, finding something liberating in reality that did not demand consistency. 1 year after Operation Contradiction stood on Earth for the first time. He had been born on a human colony ship and had never seen the sun was setting in the east, as it did on Thursdays. Islands dotted the ocean that would not be there tomorrow. The sky showed stars from 2 different time periods simultaneously. "This is what we saved," he said to who had come to visit. "This beautiful, impossible mess." Watched the sunset with his 4 eyes, seeing things his ancestors could never have perceived. "My people thought we were normal and you were aberrations. But perhaps it is the other way around. Perhaps you are what life becomes when the universe tries its hardest to kill it. Pure, refined, stronger than anything that grew in comfortable spaces." "Not stronger," corrected gently. "Just different. We are not better than you. We just had to adapt to worse circumstances. Any species could have done what we did, given enough time and enough suffering. The galaxy just got lucky that we were the ones who evolved in hell first." That night a new signal appeared from a different dead zone, one that had been silent even longer than the Whisper grave. It was another mathematical proof, elegant and deliberate. Another civilization, calling out from impossible darkness. The human response was immediate. Ships began preparing. Volunteers assembled, both human and adapted council species, ready to answer the call. Doctor broadcast a message toward the signal, using the techniques that could pierce the Whisper itself. "We hear you. Hold on. We are coming. You are not alone." The void answered back with humans, and now we answer for the void. Whatever you are facing, whatever impossible reality you survived, we understand. We are proof that life persists even where it should not. Wait for us. We are coming. The message was received across the Pragmatic Alliance. Thousands of volunteers signed up immediately. The pure species sent observers, cautiously interested. Perhaps there were others like humanity, waiting in the dark places. Perhaps the universe was full of impossible survivors, each one forged by unique hells. Stood on the bridge of the new ship, the impossible Accord as it prepared to launch. Beside him stood, and a crew of 50 different species, all adapted, all changed, all capable of thinking in ways their ancestors never could. "Are you afraid?" asked. Smiled, terrified, but fear is just another contradiction to work with. We are scared and we are brave. We are weak and we are strong. We are damaged and we are whole. This is what it means to be alive in a universe that wants us dead. We accept the contradiction and we move forward anyway. The ship launched into the dark, heading toward another dead zone, another impossible place where something lived despite the universe's best efforts to prevent it. Behind them, the galaxy continued adapting, learning to live with controlled chaos, discovering that reality was negotiable and survival was a choice. And in the Whisper Grave, the entity remained trapped in its eternal loop, forever trying to solve contradictions that had no solution. It would rage there for eons, a cosmic force contained by the same chaos it tried to spread, imprisoned by impossibility, defeated by the beautiful, mad, determined stubbornness of beings who refused to accept that existence was an error. The void had called out, humanity had answered, and now, together with the species they had saved and changed and made stronger, they were answering for others. The story was not over, it was just beginning, and that more than anything else was the most human thing of all.